Your Eminence, Your Excellencies, and Reverend Fathers, dear American friends, дорога українська громадо, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor on behalf of the government of Ukraine to open the Holodomor Memorial 5th anniversary virtual event. This monument in the heart of the US Capitol is a tribute to the memory of victims of one of the most horrible tragedy, not only in the history of my country and Ukrainian people, but the entire humankind. The man-made Holodomor-Genocide, masterminded by Stalin regime in order to crush Ukrainian identity and suppress resistance to the collectivization of agriculture in Ukraine, which was the breadbasket of the USSR. The Holodomor led to the death by starvation of millions of innocent men, women and children. It must be seen as a high moral duty to promote and spread the truth about one of the least known genocides in the world, the Holodomor of 1932-33 in Ukraine, and to restore the historical justice. Facts are stubborn things, as President John Adams once said. The ultimate triumph of truth is irreversible and inevitable. Nowadays, the world not only knows the story of this heinous crime against Ukrainians, but also state by state recognizes it as genocide. Today we must also remember the tragedy of deportation, sürgün, the crime committed by the Soviet Stalin's regime against Crimean Tatars. The genocide that has obviously the same nature as Holodomor, what was done to the Crimean Tatar people in 1944, when almost half of Crimean Tatar dies in cattle-shed wagons and in places of exile in Central Asia, has an absolute clear definition. It was one of the most gravest crimes against humanity. That is why the Parliament of Ukraine has called to our allies to recognize the deportation of the Crimean Tatar people as genocide. Ukraine highly appreciates an essential and strong support of our friends and partners in the fight we are waging against the aggressor. The United States has played a key role in providing Ukraine with their invaluable assistance. The strategic partnership between Ukraine and the United States is strengthening year by year and covers all spheres. Ukrainians who have lived and keep living abroad have made a huge contribution in this partnership and in our struggle too. We're highly praising your merit in the Ukrainian fight, and we will keep our common path. Dear friends, the spirit of freedom has sprouted through the hardship of famine, repressions, exile and wars in Ukraine. Through all these tragedies, millions gave their lives for the right to live in a free and independent state. And this right will never be taken away from us. What we are going through as a country and a society since 2014 is our will to overcome the Soviet heritage in all spheres of our life. And we are grateful to all our international partners for being with us in our struggle to live a better life based on democracy and rule of law. Glory to Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!
Today, we honor the memory of the millions of Ukrainians who died as a result of the Holodomor, the Soviet-imposed famine that led to widespread suffering and starvation in Ukraine in 1932 and 1933. These millions were not just a number. They were mothers and fathers, sons, daughters, siblings and friends, citizens, Ukrainians. This memorial, erected 5 years ago here in Washington, D.C., and the somber annual commemoration of these events help us honor the memory of those who were lost. They were lost to Soviet policies designed to crush the national ambitions of the Ukrainian people and exploit them for financial gain. But despite the horrors they have faced, today, Ukrainians are stronger than ever.
Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, and Reverend Fathers, dear friends. Today we gathered online to celebrate virtually the 5th anniversary since the majestic and mournful Holodomor-Genocide Memorial appeared in Washington, D.C. The work on this creation started in 2006, when the U.S. Congress and President George W. Bush gave their approval to this project. After 9 years of hard work of many people in both Ukraine and the United States of America, on November 7, 2015, a bronze and granite memorial was unveiled in the US Capitol. It depicts a field of wheat slowly receding into perspective and finally disappearing, which symbolizes a disappearing of hope and vanishing life. An inscription in both English and Ukrainian says, "In memory of the millions of innocent victims of a man-made famine in Ukraine, engineered and implemented by Stalin's totalitarian regime." During those times, the hunger was an attempt to bring Ukrainians to their knees, deprive them of any hope to chart their own destiny, forget, even in dreams, about the possibility of ever having their own state. Having massacred by hunger millions of innocent people, the Bolshevik regime for many years strived to kill the very memory about them. However, despite the decades of concealing the fact of Holodomor, the world knows and remembers it now. The memorial in the capital of the United States not only reminds about the tragedy and warns the world against repeating such an atrocity in the future. It is yet another symbol of the immortality of the Ukrainian nation and spirit. I would like to thank everyone who has put tremendous efforts to go the long way from an idea to its implementation. Let me express special gratitude to the United States of America for the support of the Holodomor cause and all Ukrainian Americans for their dedication and for keeping the memory about Holodomor genocide for all those years. Dear friends, as a tradition, on Saturday, November 28, 2020, Ukrainians and their friends all over the world will commemorate the 87th anniversary of Holodomor of 1932-33 in Ukraine. I would ask you on that day to take a few minutes of your daily routine, put a lighted candle on the window sill of your house, and remember the innocent victims of the Holodomor. May the flickering flame of millions of candles warm the souls of those who died from starvation in 1932-1933 in Ukraine.
Your Excellencies, members of the community, dear friends. In a city of monuments, a city of hope where dreams motivate a nation, The Ukrainian Holodomor Memorial was dedicated 5 years ago today, witnessed by thousands of people who traveled from near and far. Since its dedication, thousands of tourists, commuters, and residents have passed by this sculpture of remembrance, read the inscription about the famine genocide Holodomor, and familiarized themselves with this crime against humanity. But the significance of this memorial is not only to remember and to commemorate, but to understand the wanton disregard of the Ukrainian people imposed by the ruthless dictator Joseph Stalin, and to be mindful of events in the present era for similar patterns and behaviors. Our common unifying theme is clear. Україна пам'ятає, світ визнає. Ukraine remembers, the world acknowledges. Join the efforts to promote Holodomor awareness through advancing Holodomor curriculum in high schools throughout the United States, revoking Walter Duranty's Pulitzer Prize, partnering with genocide studies centers in the United States, establishing a Holodomor Descendants Network, displaying Holodomor exhibits in museums and public venues, advocating for recognition of the Holodomor as a genocide in each state, and spreading the knowledge of Holodomor through social media outlets. As we gather today to commemorate this 5th anniversary of the dedication, let us pledge to one another. We will always recall the victims of the Ukrainian Holodomor and their incredible sacrifice, as well as to thank those who continue to bring this tragic episode of man's inhumanity to man to the attention of the world. Вічна пам'ять жертвам Голодомору. Слава Україні!
Dear friends, today we are here together with you, with our Ukrainian friends, and along with Ukraine we commemorate the victims of the Holodomor. Latvia supports Ukraine's efforts to strive for historical justice and gain international condemnation of the genocide against the people of Ukraine. Back in 2008, the Parliament of Latvia adopted a declaration and recognized Holodomor as genocide committed against the people of Ukraine. We have been and will be an advocate of Ukraine at the international level. It is the utmost importance for the international community to remember this horrific page of Ukrainian history and to demonstrate a clear and strong stance towards aggressive behavior in international politics. Holodomor tragedy serves as a reminder for present and future generations that only deep respect for human rights and right to life provide guarantee that such atrocities should not happen again.
This year marks the 87th anniversary of the culmination of the Great Famine, a tragic crime committed by the despotic Bolshevik regime that governed the Soviet Union. Its purpose was to weaken and destroy the Ukrainian people, suppressing its aspirations for freedom and its dreams for regaining its independence as a state. Soviet-mandated collectivization and the forced contribution of agricultural goods were a death sentence for millions of people living in Ukraine and other regions of the USSR. Capital punishment was commonly used against those who, suffering from malnourishment and extreme hunger, dared to pick grains left in the fields. They were denied medical care, and the deceased often did not receive a dignified burial. The vast majority of victims of this organized wrongdoing were Ukrainians, but Poles were also among them. This is our shared pain, both Polish and Ukrainian. The Holodomor is a particular tragedy in modern European history. It is impossible to speak otherwise about the millions of victims of hunger and exhaustion and their terrible suffering, a slow death. The tragedy of dying Ukrainian towns and villages was even greater as it unfolded in front of an indifferent yet civilized Europe. For decades, knowledge about the Holodomor was falsified, and those who dared to speak about it were mocked and in some cases even killed. Only after Ukraine regained its independence did it become possible to bring justice to the victims of the Holodomor. Poles too honored the lives of those who perished. In 2006, the Polish Senate recognized the Great Famine in Ukraine as a genocide. In 2009, at the cemetery in Warsaw's Wola district, Presidents Lech Kaczynski and Viktor Yushchenko unveiled a cross commemorating the victims of the Great Famine. And in 2018, a resolution was adopted to commemorate the 85th anniversary of the tragedy, expressing Poland's solidarity with the Ukrainian nation in preserving the memory of the Holodomor and in striving to inform the public about the tragedy. Today, it is my honor to pay tribute to all of those who perished during the Great Famine in Ukraine, as well as to those who fought to defend the nation against communist tyranny and hypocrisy. Poland stands in solidarity with the actions of the Ukrainian people in commemorating this tragedy, which should never be forgotten and should serve as a warning against totalitarian ideology. I would also like to express my deepest sympathy to the families of the victims, uniting myself in pain and prayer with all who have been affected by this tragedy.
This year, we commemorate 87 years since one of the worst tragedies in human history, Ukrainian Holodomor. What is even more important is that this tragedy was not a natural tragedy. It was a tragedy created by human hand. And this is why in Lithuania we call it for what it is. It was a genocide of the Ukrainian people. It is so important to remember that. It is so important to commemorate that. This is why it's so important that this monument is here in Washington, D.C. for already 5 years. These days, there are countries and there are regimes who want to rewrite history, who want to tell things the way they want them to be understood. We need to remember things how they were. And that is why today we lower our heads to remember all these people whose lives were lost because of Holodomor.
Distinguished participants, Hungarians are acutely aware of the Holodomor and the suffering caused to Ukrainians. Already in 2003, the Hungarian parliament adopted a resolution of the 70th anniversary of the Great Famine, expressing its solidarity and condemning all forms of discrimination based on racial, national, and ethnic origin. The first Holodomor Memorial was unveiled in Budapest in 2009, the second in the next year in Csömör. Since 2018, the statue of Ukrainian sculptor Bogdan Korsh stands in the city in Szeged. Last year also witnessed the unveiling of another Holodomor Memorial in Nyíregyháza. Our two countries fought against the same dictatorial regime that tried to deprive their people of their rights. Stalin saw Ukrainians as a chief enemy, as they were a freedom-loving nation that posed a threat to the Soviet Union. Hungary posed a similar threat and shared a similar fate in 1956. On this solemn occasion, Hungary is proud to stand with Ukraine again, uniting in defense of sovereignty, territorial integrity, independence, and in the protection of inalienable human rights.
In the last 5 years, the National Holodomor Memorial has claimed its rightful place in Washington, D.C., a city full of monuments and memorials. At the busy intersection of North Capitol Street and Massachusetts Avenue, in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, and not far from Union Station, the busiest transit hub in Washington, it serves as a dignified and constant reminder to Americans about the horrible tragedy of the Holodomor in Ukraine, a country a half a world away. Dozens of tour buses drive by daily, in which you can see and hear tour guides pointing to the memorial and explaining what it commemorates. Passengers in thousands of cars cannot help but see the word Holodomor embedded in the sculpture and wonder what it means. And the hundreds of pedestrians who walk by, initially drawn in by the sheer beauty of the sculpted wheat, eventually comprehend the engineered loss of human life as symbolized in the relentless disappearance of the wheat into the void of the sculpture. Ukrainians throughout the world should be proud that this memorial is doing its part to shine a light in Washington, D.C. on the terrible injustice of the Ukrainian Holodomor and its millions of innocent victims. Vichnaya pamyat. It has been an honor to have contributed as a design architect to this noble cause.
Dear friends, on behalf of the Ukrainian World Congress, which represents the interests of more than 20 million Ukrainians in over 65 countries outside Ukraine, I extend my best wishes, gratitude, and sincere regards to the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America on the 5th anniversary of their unveiling of the monument to the victims of the Holodomor, Ukraine's famine genocide of 1932-33, which claimed the lives of millions of innocent victims at the murderous hands of Stalin's Soviet regime. The UCCA has played a pivotal role in ensuring the erection of the Washington Holodomor Memorial in a prominent location in the nation's capital on U.S. federal land. Moreover, the UCCA has been instrumental in ensuring both U.S. and international recognition of the Holodomor as a genocide against the Ukrainian nation. Under their leadership, the Ukrainian American community has supported Holodomor education in schools across the United States, held commemorative services such as the annual Requiem at New York's St. Patrick Cathedral, and supported campaigns to rebuke Holodomor deniers, such as the campaign to revoke the Pulitzer Prize from Stalin's apologist Walter Duranty. Our work must continue to ensure that the crimes of Stalin are well known around the world, so that we could put a stop to modern-day tyranny by the likes of Vladimir Putin, who continues to oppress any opposition through intimidation, poisoning, and killing, while attempting to control his peaceful neighbors through military, economic, and political warfare. May God inspire us to do good, and may the memory of the victims of the Holodomor be eternal. Вічна їм пам'ять.
For over 8 decades, the Ukrainian American community and our many friends have gathered to pray for and honor the memory of the millions of innocent victims lost in one of the worst tragedies that befell the Ukrainian nation, the Holodomor-Genocide of 1932-33. What occurred 86 years ago in Ukraine was evil in its design and brutal in its methods. It was a deliberate act within the intent to destroy the Ukrainian nation. Today, as we commemorate the anniversary of the unveiling of the Holodomor Monument in Washington, D.C., and mourn the millions of senseless deaths, we pray that such atrocities never occur again. We must also recommit ourselves to exposing the truth, the whole truth about the Holodomor. It is our solemn responsibility to pass the torch to the next generation, as they must continue to stand firm in honoring the millions who needlessly suffered at the hands of a dictator, and help to educate the world, especially now as Ukraine is in its 6th year fighting to preserve its independence and territorial integrity from Russian aggression. To the millions of innocent victims who perished as a result of Stalin's brutal genocide policy, may you rest in peace. You will always be remembered and honored. Вічна їм пам'ять.